Alicia Gray's moment with the crowd was supposed to be a footnote, a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment in a tense playoff battle. Instead, it became one of the strangest sagas of the WNBA postseason. In the middle of a must-win game against the Indiana Fever, Gray turned toward the stands, pointed at a group of fans, and motioned for security. On live television, viewers saw it unfold in real time. The cameras caught the confusion, the fans rising reluctantly as staff escorted them out, and the sudden shift in atmosphere. For a few minutes, the storyline wasn't about the Fever's fight to stay alive in the playoffs. It was about a confrontation between a player and the paying public. But like so many things that spiral out of control, the truth unraveled quickly, and by the end of the night, it wasn't Gray who looked like the victim, it was Indiana Fever fans who walked away with vindication. The incident started with nothing more than what witnesses described as light heckling. One fan sitting near the court shouted encouragement to Lexi Hull, telling her she was playing well and that Gray wasn't even trying anymore. Standard playoff banter. Nothing vulgar, nothing personal. It's just the kind of jab athletes have heard since the beginning of competitive sports. But instead of brushing it off or using it as motivation, Gray reacted with visible frustration. She signaled to security, and moments later, the fans were ushered out, leaving the rest of the arena buzzing with questions. What exactly had been said? Why were fans being removed during a playoff game? And most importantly, why did the story start to fracture as soon as the incident was reported? Within hours, competing narratives emerged. Some claimed the fans had crossed a line. Others insisted it was simply noise blown out of proportion. By the next morning, the story completely collapsed. Eyewitnesses confirmed that the fans hadn't said anything inappropriate. In fact, security brought them back to their seats, apologizing for the disruption and essentially admitting there was no wrongdoing. What was painted as a serious issue in the heat of the game was revealed to be little more than frustration spilling over from a player who wasn't performing well. Gray, after all, was struggling that night. Shots weren't falling, momentum was slipping, and Atlanta as a team looked out of sync. Instead of digging in, she seemed to latch onto a distraction, but the move backfired spectacularly. The optics were brutal. Instead of generating sympathy, the dream looked rattled. Instead of focusing on basketball, they created a sideshow that only highlighted their unraveling performance. And while they were tied up in confusion, Indiana was locked in, snapping a near-decade playoff drought with a win that sent their home crowd into absolute euphoria. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. On one side, Atlanta was scrambling to spin a story, trying to redirect attention toward phantom disrespect from the stands. On the other, Indiana was writing history, controlling the floor, and proving their resilience without multiple starters. As fans said afterward, one side was pointing at the crowd while the other was pointing at the scoreboard. The irony is that the WNBA has been begging for more fan engagement, more ticket sales, more energy in the arenas. Yet here, in the middle of a high-stakes playoff game, engaged fans were literally thrown out for cheering. It didn't sit right with the public. Clips of the incident spread online, many questioning how professional athletes could call for security over what amounted to basic heckling. Social media branded it a hoax. Fans mocked Gray for being unable to handle the spotlight. Comparisons popped up to past fake controversies. Painting the episode as another case of players looking for excuses rather than owning the moment. Meanwhile, Indiana showed the exact opposite mentality. Short-handed and undermanned, they rallied behind Kelsey Mitchell's shooting, Aaliyah Boston's strength inside, and the collective grit of a roster missing Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and several key contributors. Instead of folding under the pressure, they leaned on defense, energy, and sheer willpower. The Fever dominated Game 2, sending the series back to Atlanta for a deciding Game 3, with the entire league watching by the end of the night. The fan removal wasn't even the real headline anymore. What mattered was that Indiana reminded the world of what playoff toughness looks like. Fans saw a team that didn't complain, didn't point fingers, and didn't search for distractions. They saw a team that fought possession by possession and gave a city its first playoff win since 2015. The scoreboard didn't lie, and no narrative spin could change that for Atlanta. The episode with Gray was a self-inflicted wound. Instead of tightening up their defense, or rallying together as a group, they looked fragile. And fragility is lethal in playoff basketball. For Indiana, it was validation. Even without their superstar, they carried themselves like professionals who could handle the moment. And as they walked off the floor victorious, it was clear which side had the composure to advance. Game 3 became more than a decider. It was the perfect setup, a clash between a team spinning excuses and a team spinning wins. For the Fever, it was survival and history rolled into one. The Dream, it was damage control. And in the eyes of fans, there was no contest. So while Alicia Gray's finger-pointing will fade into another social media controversy, the Fever's response will live much longer. The drought is over. The resilience is real. No matter what spin Atlanta tried to sell, the truth was written in bold numbers on the scoreboard.